This lab is about high availability and dynamic resource scheduling using vSphere client. We start with by adding a new cluster into a team data center using all the default value and being created. After the cluster has been created, drag and drop the existing host to the clusters. To allow high availability to work on our host, we have to make sure that vMotion is enabled on each of the vhost. We can check this by going to each of the host configuration and make sure vMotion is enabled and permissions check is enabled on every host in the clusters. After checking vMotion is enabled in every host, we are going to add two data store to each of the hosts. Because vSphere's high availability use Datastore to monitor hosts and VMs when management network fails, and we're adding heartbeat Datastore to each of the hosts. Now the configuration for high availability is done. We are going to do vMotion migration of active streaming VM from one host to another host to test the configuration to make sure VM and host are set up correctly.
As you can see, the VM has migrated successfully. We will deploy a new virtual machine from the existing template and name the new virtual machine as T07 VM2 Lab 4. We'll choose the host as 195. Next we'll choose our team's data store, NFS3 team 07. Click on next and now on finish. As you can see from the logs, a new VM is being created. As you can see, the VM has been successfully created. Now next we need to do is configure our cluster for HA. Before that, we'll power on our VM. Right click on the cluster and click on edit settings. There choose the option turn on vSphere HA and then go to the data store heartbeating and choose the data stores as mentioned in the manual and then click on OK. As you can see, the configuration task is in progress. All the configuration are being applied to the cluster, to all the 3 existing hosts. You can see the second VM is on host 195. Now we'll turn off the host 195 in order to see what happens when the host goes down to the VM. The host has been shut down. As you can see from the summary, it says host failed. Now after some time, when we check the summary for VM2, it says now it exists on the host 194. Hence the HA works.
Now we will configure our cluster for DRS. For that, we will first go to our cluster, right click, edit settings, uncheck turn on vSphere HA and click OK. Now our cluster is unconfiguring. Once it is done, we will again go to our cluster, right click, edit settings and check turn on vSphere DRS. Once it is done, we will reconfigure our third vhost. We will increase its memory to 4 GB. For that, we will go to our vhost, turn it off and then change its memory from 2 GB to 4 GB. You can see we are changing the memory of our vhost from 2 GB to 4 GB. The memory has been changed. Now we will power on our vhost. Now we will go to our vCenter and wait for our host to power on. Now we will create a third VM from an already existing template and name that VM as T07 VM3 Lab 4. And configure that to our cluster. We will choose a data store, that is NFS3 Team 07. Click next, click finish. A new virtual machine is created. Now we will reconfigure our virtual machines. We'll change their memories from 1 GB to 2 GB. Now two of our virtual machines have memories 2 GB. Our third virtual machine that has a memory of 1 GB, we will change that to 3 GB. Right click on that virtual machine, go to edit settings and change that memory. Now you can see our third virtual machine is on host 193. Now we will power on our all three of our virtual machines. Now our cluster will auto migrate our virtual machines according to the respective memories and the respective memories of the hosts. As you can see in the status bar, now virtual machines have been powered on. As you can see in the status bar, virtual machine 2 and virtual machine 1 are being migrated from the current host to a respective host. Virtual machine 2 has been migrated to 193, and while the virtual machine 1 will be migrated to 194. check that, we will go to summary. And our virtual machine 3 that has the memory of 3 GB is on host 195 that has the memory of 4 GB.
The next step is to create 2 new VMs. Right click on your template, give the new virtual machine a name, click on next, then check the settings for the cluster that you want to create it on, click on next, and then select your data store, that is NFS3 Team 07, click on next, and then check the details and then click on finish. Now you can see that it is in progress and it is being created. Go to the VMs and templates view and right click on the template and create another new virtual machine, that is deploying the new virtual machine. Give it a name. This is our 5th virtual machine, so VM5, and then click on next, select the cluster, click on next, and then select the data store that you want to create it on, and finally check the details of the new virtual machine that you want to create. In the taskbar you can see that it is being created and it is in progress. Change the view to hosts and clusters. And now the cluster is being reconfigured, and you can see that the system has initiated the tasks of migrating virtual machine. Once these VMs have been created, the system initiates a virtual machine reallocation and reconfiguration. We can see that in the status bar down. And once the reconfiguration is done, you can just right click on the VMs to power them on. And the power on has also been shown in the taskbar. Now we power on the next virtual machine. And now the next step is to turn the DRS on. Right click on the cluster, edit settings, vSphere DRS, and then select partially automated and then click on OK. We've just explored all the options that are available to us in this particular step. And then you can see that VM2 is running on 195, 3 on 193, 4 on 195, and 5 on 195.
And now we click the DRS tab and then click the Run DRS button on right hand side. So Run DRS checks if any VM is facing any problem or is hosted on a host where CPU or resources are less. Now we are going through all the VMs and checking if they are on the same host. We are just checking the host IPs there. Now we click on Edit Settings and change the automation level to partially automated. Okay, and now we run DRS again to see if we get any recommendations. So we are trying to refresh and run DRS again and again to see if there is any recommendation yet. Now as we see, all the VMs are powered off, so we'll power on all the VMs one by one. Now we again check, we run DRS, and now we see a suggestion, and so this suggestion is to balance the average CPU load. So we can either apply the recommendation, or so now we applied it. So the recommendation is based on memory and CPU usage. So DRS tries to balance the load in different hosts. After applying the recommendation, VMs might be migrated to a new host as per the system requirements and all. So some VMs are reallocated to appropriate hosts, and sometimes maybe before migrating we are asked if we want to migrate or not. So right now we can see one of the virtual machine, lab 4, is migrating to a new host. So finally the migration will complete soon, and we'll be able to see the VM migrated to a new machine. And this is how DRS works. Thank you.